Welcome, everybody. Episode 84 of Christian Geeks Rockcast. I'm your host, Steve Chalk, and Britt Mooney is also with us as host. And we have a special guest on the podcast today, and that is Mr. Luke Easter. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Welcome, man.
Yeah, Luke Easter, who most of you are probably well aware of this, solo artist these days. He's been with Tourniquet, and then he wasn't with Tourniquet. Now he's back with Tourniquet, or maybe he never was not with Tourniquet. I don't know. We'll get to the bottom of that. But he sings with every other Christian metal band that exists.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but he's the knight in shining armor for the classic Christian metal world. So welcome to the podcast. We are honored to have you on.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. It's always, I don't take it for granted when people want to talk to me. I've been at it for a long time, but that doesn't mean that I'm at all interesting. So I'm always thankful when somebody wants to have a conversation. So thanks for having me on.
Sweet. Well, that we actually this podcast survives on being surprised by how much people are still interested in all this stuff. So
Right. Yes.
like when we started this thing out, it was we thought Britt and I thought we were going to be talking to like 10 people every
Yeah.
episode, and fortunately it's quite a bit more than that. But
I think that's our like tagline. Oh, we're surprised you're interested. That's I think that's our tagline.
thank you for still being alive.
Thank you for listening
I think
to us
it-
on the way to the doctor.
Yeah, if you're interested in this kind of music, it's probably time you had your colonoscopy.
There you go.
But anyway, I digress.
That's real.
So I'm going to start off with just the softball question, and then we'll kind of dig a little bit deeper. But kind of you're probably a man of around our age, and so you probably grew up with a lot of similar influences. But what were your influences, and what got you started in music and that sort of thing?
I have always loved to sing. And I guess I have generally been decent at it. I started off singing solos in chapel in kindergarten, so that would have been 4 years old. And like junior high time, you start feeling kind of awkward and you don't want people to pay attention to you, so I stopped singing. And then I decided that I couldn't be a rock singer because all of the rock and metal stuff that I was hearing in my early teens was all Michael Sweet and Halford, and I don't sing like that. So I decided I would play bass because I just don't have the manual dexterity to go it well on guitar. So I was the world's worst bass player in one of the world's worst garage bands for a while. And then when I was about 19, just decided I was going to, take a shot at it and see if I could be a singer in a rock band, and got into a local band and jumped right from there into Tourniquet about 3 years later.
Now, was the because I'm trying to remember exactly when Vanishing Lessons came out, but it was right there in the early '90s, right? It was right there.
Yeah, Vanishing Lessons was 94.
94.
And back to your original question too, you're asking about influences. I mean, I grew up in a church home, in a Christian home. So, I remember, enduring the Maranatha Singers and a lot of Ralph Carmichael and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not something I would put on now, and it's not something. I mean, when you're a kid, 5, 6, 7, you don't really have your own, tastes, your own point of view. It's like, okay, I guess this is what we listen to in the car. Everybody must listen to this in the car, And then you get older and you realize, no, maybe everybody else doesn't really listen to that. And again, it's not like something that I would seek out to, listen to now, but I do look at some of how my brain works musically, how I phrase certain things when I'm writing, or how I like to stack harmonies a certain way. And I think a lot of it goes back to some of that stuff, So, the early, CCM stuff, so from that stuff to like Keith Green and Second Chapter of
Mm.
Acts and all that. I mean, the first artist that I was really, really into was Steve Taylor. He was mind blowing, his creativity and his honesty and just how clever he was or is. I mean, he's still going.
Hmm.
Um, and then somehow I pivoted from, the very, uh, you know, new wave pop of Steve Taylor. Somehow, I mean, I got into Striper, and I just like music. When people are like, "Oh, I'm a metal guy," or "I'm a this guy," or "I'm a that guy," if I'm being completely honest in terms of just what my preference is and what I'm going to throw on if I'm in the car or puttering around the house, generally it's going to lean more to the pop side of things. Because uh, I just I like the structures. I like the song, the way the songs are built. But I love lots of stuff, and I'm as likely to be caught listening to Weezer or Taylor Swift as I am to be listening to Slayer. You know,
Hmm.
um, and so I mean, but the obvious influences would be like Striper, Bon Jovi, Extreme. On the heavier side, I mean, I'm originally from the Bay Area and I grew up in the 80s, so you kind of have to like Metallica. It helps that, especially back in the day when they were in their prime, they were amazing, so that makes it easier to be a fan. But, Megadeth,
Hmm.
Metallica, Slayer, you know, I just like music. Show me a good song and I will listen to it. Doesn't mean I'll be a fan necessarily, but if it's a good song, I want to hear a good song.
Mm.
And I think that's a lot of what, when Britt and I first started talking about doing this podcast, we both are very much in that we're both fans of a lot of different stuff. Like
Yeah.
Britt kind of leans a little more metal than me, and I kind of lean a little more like alt rock than him, but we mesh more than we don't. So it make, show me a good album, a good song, some well-written stuff, melodic, that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
Just
So
keeps it interesting too. If when you're, when your friends don't like everything you like,
hmm.
it keeps it from becoming an echo chamber, and it keeps you open to new stuff that you might not necessarily find on your own. Sorry to
yeah.
interrupt, Brett.
No, no.
True.
I'm just remembering when I was still in high school and we went to the record store and I bought two cassettes. I bought Metallica and Justice for All and Tracy Chapman's first album.
See?
And my friends were like, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I like them both." I think they're, of course, when I got into bands, it was more, I played bass for more the metal side. But so what I was going to ask earlier is, was the change in music that was happening in the early 90s, did that help you want to get back into singing? Like it wasn't as much about the screaming and the high,
Um,
operatic or whatever thing?
it there was a time that I would not have said this. I'm pretty open about it now, but especially like when I first joined Tourniquet, it was like, you like what? Don't tell anybody that, you know. But it sounds silly, but I 100% mean it. Um, I wanted to sing. I liked to sing. I still, I'd sing in the car, or if I was at home alone or whatever. I liked to sing. And so when we finally got MTV in my town, and I saw the video for "Living on a Prayer" and heard John, and I was like, I could sing like that, dude. And that's kind of when, that was kind of the shift that, I think I want to do that. I want to be John Bon Jovi. And then, obviously I did not wind up becoming John Bon Jovi, but that was really kind of the flashpoint for it. It was like, oh, okay, you can do that, and you don't have to sound like those guys. You can just sound like a normal dude.
Right.
Uh, Yeah, for a long, John is probably my biggest influence, just
Really?
in terms of singing. Well, because maybe not influence, but if you if there was some way of aggregating who's gotten the most play and who I've sung along with the most, especially when I was trying to find my style or develop a sound, it would be Bon Jovi records. Up until probably I didn't lose interest, but I was less dazzled post Crush.
I,
But everything up to Crush, and even stuff after Crush was good up to a point. But
mm-hmm.
by that point, I was already, I was in Tourniquet and I was doing my thing, and um, it was yeah, he was less influential at that
Yeah.
point. But yeah, John Bon Jovi was kind of the kick in the pants.
Well, I was just okay. So, quick question: can you name you may not? Do you have a favorite Bon Jovi song? Because there were two albums there that are pretty much perfect albums to me: "Slippery When Wet" and then the next one. Those
New
those two
Jersey,
were huh?
New Jersey.
Yeah. Those two were pretty much perfect
Jersey is
albums.
the better album. Both those albums are amazing. New Jersey, in my opinion, is the better album. I can play that one end to end, and I still
Oh,
don't really skip tracks. I love Slippery, but I don't ever have to hear Without Love again. I've heard that before. I don't really have to hear Social Disease again.
yeah, that's a skipper. Yeah.
But in terms of, I mean,
I just didn't know if you had any favorites off the top of your head.
the perfect pop rock song, nobody else has ever come close, is Living on a Prayer. I wish I'd written that song. The first time I heard it, I'm like, "Wow, I want to do something like that." That that song is perfect. It's got everything.
Yeah.
It even has key change, and I generally don't like key changes. I think
I like them.
key changes to me are lazy songwriting. It's like I
Yeah.
can't figure out how to finish the song. Oh, I'll just have a key change there, and we're. But the key change works on Living on a Prayer because it's more minor up to that point, and it's more resigned. And it's like we're fighting, we're slogging it out. We just got to get through this, and then for whatever reason they have their breakthrough moment, and all of a sudden it just goes up that little bit, and suddenly it's more major, and it sounds triumphant, like we've got this, we can do this, we can beat this. you know it's one of the only songs that I don't sit there going, you're lazy.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and I think they thought the same thing too, because they do that one bit where it's higher and then it drops back to the main key again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I've often said that's the best song of the 80s for
so
sure.
It's
80s, 90s, and the 2000s.
but what I was kind of getting to before with the time frame, that was kind of when grunge was coming in, and I thought, I don't know how intentional it was, but for Tourniquet to bring you in '94 when you didn't sound just like anybody really, but you more fit into that mold. I thought it was great. I fell in love with your voice immediately and the new style and the whole
Thank you.
thing. But
I joined in
what
93. I
say
joined in
again?
93. I joined in 93 for the Pathogenic tour.
Right.
Um, and I can't speak for them, but I know that initially it was just, there was a tour booked and they hadn't found a singer yet. And then I got in touch with them, and I mean, it literally, I sent them a tape. A couple weeks later, I was in LA rehearsing, or no, a couple weeks later, I was down there auditioning. A week after that, I was down there rehearsing, and then a week after that, we were opening the tour in Oklahoma. So I think initially it just came down to, he can sing the songs and he can play, so let's go. But in terms of like trying to do, be more grungy or whatever, there was, it really wasn't that thought out. It was just like, okay, you're the singer now, and then
Mm,
I could do different things than Guy had done
right.
before, and there's a lot that Guy does that I can't pull off. But we figured out, the sweet spot where it worked for everybody, and then we just ran with that for a while.
Yeah.
And
There,
whatever hallmarks of whatever era came along after I joined, I think it was just coincidental, just the timing.
Mm.
there's a lot of things Guy does that I don't think anybody can do.
Right, exactly.
Probably.
That dude's crazy. Um, so you joined for the Pathogenic tour, and then you recorded Vanishing Lessons. That was the first album with them. Now I
Yes.
know Brit, that's like your favorite album by Tourniquet, right?
I don't know,
Or is
man.
it close to?
Psychosurgery is right up there. Those two are probably tied. Those two are probably
Yeah.
Okay.
tied.
But I know he's been chomping at the bit to ask about Vanishing Lessons for sure. He's been talking about it for months.
Awesome.
No, I mean it was again, I mean, I was around that same age of the time, I was in, I was whatever around 20, and I was transitioning from doing the doing the hair metal ish sort of stuff. I was into a lot of progressive metal too. But like I said, I was in a lot of different styles of music. So for me, the guy who was into King's X and into Galactic Cowboys and into Metallica and Tracy Chapman, the whole grunge scene, it worked for me. It was like, oh, it's heavy and it's open chords and it's the whole thing. And I could sing it and I could sing that stuff. And so that's when I started singing in bands, is because I could sing like Eddie Vedder and Stone Temple Pilots. I could sing like that. And so, I really loved the album. I thought the songwriting was really strong. It was eclectic again, and a little more like the psycho in different ways, but like Psychosurgery was eclectic. That's one of the things I like about it. And but it was probably a big shift for you, right? You were how old when you started in 93, 19, 20?
93, I was 22. I was 22. And then, yeah, a year later, I'm in the studio. So I recorded Vanishing Lessons. I was 23, maybe just turned 24. And yeah, I was just happy to be there. I mean, I didn't write a note. I couldn't have asked for a better first album experience. We recorded it at Rumbo in Canoga Park, and we were in one room. Firehouse was in the next room, and Mike
Goodness.
Klink was working with some band. I think they were called Mother's Little Fun House or something like that. They were a Geffen band, but all the Guns N' Roses guys were in and out, playing on that record. Uh, Captain and Tennille owned it, and so the captain showed up a couple times and hung out. It
Yeah.
was awesome.
Was he wearing
You
the
know,
hat? Did he wear the hat?
oh, he's wearing a cap. He wasn't
Oh,
wearing the captain's hat,
oh
Mm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but his license plate said something like the captain or something like that. But I mean, we worked with Jim Faraci, who'd done the first few Rat albums with Beau Hill. It was just
Oh,
like I've arrived. You know,
Mhm.
the next records were not necessarily so glamorous, but I'm happy that I had that experience, because I was growing up in the 80s. That's all you want, right? Is that kind of deal. But also, it was invaluable working with Jim for the first time. Um, he pushed me and pulled performances out of me that I wouldn't have known I could pull off. But he also he was gracious, because he knew I'd never done a record before. So he'd push when he needed to, and he'd let up and kind of let me find my way at other times.
mm,
But also just the discipline of recording onto tape, versus doing it all digitally now.
right.
Um, you could punch stuff in, but you couldn't do it as tight as you can now. And there was pitch correction, but it wasn't easy like it is now. So every note that I sang on that record, I sang those notes on that record. And so as I've moved, through my career, um, I think I've still got that ethic in there, because even doing the solo stuff, Chris and I were doing that in Pro Tools, and we could have just cheated and flown all the choruses around and, pitch corrected. That's good enough. But, he did his first record on tape. I did my first record on tape. And we both very much believed that the technology is a tool, but the technology can't be the performance. So I would just sing my little heart out until we got something that was as close to perfect as I could get it. And then, for things like harmony stacks or something, you tweak them so that they're, perfect, because those you are going to fly around and those need to be perfect,
Hmm.
but otherwise you sing it until it's right. And for
Hmm.
me, that all goes back to that first record.
So I'm going to ask a question that. So Steve and I were trying to think of questions you haven't been asked that we haven't heard yet on a couple of these other podcasts. Um, I think Victor, the bass player that played on that
Mhm.
album, is a phenomenal bass player. And of course,
I agree.
as a former or aspiring or whatever bass player that you were there for a while,
Recovering bass player.
what was it like to work with him in the studio? Because a lot of people talk about, Lanier and they talk about Ted, and it's like that dude could play. Like that bass
Oh,
player, he was amazing.
Victor was great. He's very creative, um, killer tone, and that was all him.
Yeah.
Um, he knew. I shouldn't talk about him in the past tense. He's still going strong. Love that dude. Um, he knows. Uh, he knows how to walk right up to the edge of overplaying without overpowering everything and wrecking the song. But then he also has this great instinct for when to just pull back and play really, really simple and let the guitars or the vocal or whatever else. Um, Very musical. 90% of the time, super easy to work with. Every once in a while, it's like, no, I'm playing it like this. No, but that doesn't work. No, I'm playing it like that. But um, I mean, I did what I did. I did Vanishing, Carry the Wounded, and Collected Works with Victor, and just saw like little glimmers of that. For the most part, he was just you know awesome, awesome. He's one of the most one of the most truly musical bass players. Because I've played with other bass players that all they're really doing, they're just another percussion instrument.
Right.
Just there's notes. Victor is a very, very musical bass player.
Yeah. Yeah. I just thought he fit in so well with,
Oh, totally.
because he started on psychosurgery, right? Didn't he start on
Yes.
psychosurgery?
Yes.
And I patterned a lot of my bass sound after him, just to be flat honest. I was
Okay.
like, I love that
Hey.
bass sound. I
Yeah.
love that
Oh,
bass sound.
crazy.
And so because it fit, but a lot of those metal bands, you could hardly hear the bass half the times because it didn't stand out. It didn't. But you don't want it to stand out too much, like you were saying. You don't want it to be overpowering and it be a bass solo all the whole
Right.
song. So I just thought he did an incredible job. So what's he doing now?
He's living his life. He's, still on the West Coast. He's married. He still plays. He just uh doesn't want to do the band thing anymore, as far as I know.
Yeah,
I should give him a
that's
call. I
good.
haven't talked to him in a bit, but you know,
Yeah.
yeah, and honestly, I mean, after Collected Works and when we had the big shakeup and didn't have a bass player anymore, I mean, Aaron and Ted did, a fine job playing bass on those records, but they're guitar players,
Right.
you know.
Yep.
Um, I play bass a little bit. I play guitar a little bit. I demo my stuff out so that I can give it to whomever is going to play on it. Um, but especially with bass, it's like, please disregard that. I was just writing the root note because it needed it. But please come up with something interesting, because what I did is so not. Um, and I think that, not that the material suffered, but I think that some of the potential was lost because it was just, well, we got to get it done and we don't have a bass player.
Hmm.
It's part of why, in the current version of what we're doing, having somebody like Anna, who
Hmm.
is is also a monster player.
She is
You
a
know, it's just
monster
night and
player.
day. She's she is just, I mean, yeah, I mean, but playing those shows recently and like looking around and going, how am I on stage with these people? You know, so yeah.
Yeah.
I always think of it, this is another sort of maybe from out of left field question. Um, you guys were on Intense Records for a while, and then you moved to, was it directly to Benson for one?
No, technically we signed with Rugged,
Okay.
and Benson bought our contract.
Oh, yep. Because I was in radio at the time,
Okay.
and so I've, whether good or bad, I categorize things by record companies. You know, like
Sure.
this, when I get an envelope in from Frontline, generally know what I'm getting. When I get one from Benson, I generally know what I'm getting. And I still have it to this day. I have the
Okay.
the
The
pre-release
pre-release.
Crawl to
Yep.
China from Benson Records, and I remember going, "Is this the Tourniquet that I'm familiar with?" You know, and it was a different sounding record, but it was definitely you guys.
So we ran out our contract with Frontline. Um, as I'm sure you've heard from other people that were affiliated with Frontline, we were not at all unhappy to not be working with Frontline anymore. Um,
Hmm.
but we weren't sure where to go, and so I was less involved in the business side of things at this point. I was still just the singer and just happy to be there. But
Yeah,
the we had talked to a couple other people, but the only, like solid deal that was on the table was from Rugged. And part of why we took it was to not have to work with Frontline again. And so even if it was just a one and done, we were fine. We'll just do this record with Rugged while we figure out what to do. That was the year that Jesus Freak, and I guess Jars of Clay, but it kind of upended things in
Hmm.
Nashville at the GMAs, and so everybody had to have a rock band, and so it didn't matter who you were, it didn't matter what you sounded like, it didn't matter if you were fit for the label. How many units could you shift, and did you have a fan base, and were you a rock band? And so, I remember we went to dinner with Mike and Monica from Rugged, and then like 2 weeks later, I find out, oh no, we're not with Rugged now. We're with this other thing. Like, oh, okay. So that's. I mean, it was a little bit longer than that, but that's
yeah.
basically how we wound up at Benson, and they were really really supportive right up until they weren't. Um, but I mean, the president of the label flew out, while when we shot all the photos and stuff for the record, and it's the only time we had a stylist for photos and all that kind of stuff. The whole sales team was like, really into it. And then right before the record came out, it was two things. There was a UPS strike,
Hmm.
and the label got sold to EMI. So suddenly, all the people that had been, uh, part of making that record and that were selling it and pushing it and were our cheerleaders, were all gone.
Hmm.
That's a story I've heard from a lot of, not specifically about Benson, but I've heard that from a lot of people
Yeah,
about a lot of record companies.
and Bob Carlyle dropped Butterfly Kisses, and he was on the same label. And so I remember being in the offices at Benson, and they were getting ready. They were going to push if I was there, to radio because Easter was coming up, and we were all excited about that. And then the next thing we know, nobody that had been working with was still there, and all resources were going to make Butterfly Kisses the global phenomenon that it wound up being. Um,
Well,
then we were
and
like,
I
what about us?
and I think a lot of what my trepidation was for having Benson sign you guys was, did they even know what to do with Tourniquet? Because
They did.
Tourniquet, yeah, because Tourniquet had a, I mean, it had the band had a reputation by that point of being a certain thing that Benson was very much not. So anyway,
And we were coming from Frontline where, yes, there was an A&R guy at Frontline, and yes, there were label people that we had to, run things by before we did some things. But even then, the deal that the Tourniquet had gave pretty much, 1,000,000% creative control. So, if you don't like the record, you don't have to put it out, but you're going to take the record that we give you, and we'd proven ourselves, they had proven themselves over the first, couple of records, to where Frontline just kind of stayed out of the way and let us do our thing.
Mhm.
So like doing vanishing lessons, there was no, I mean, there was pre-production, but it was going over the material with Jim so that, he could make tweaks and do whatever, he thought needed to be done with the arrangements, so that we weren't wasting time doing that in the studio. And then we did like a 2-song demo ostensibly to give to the sales force, but it was really to assuage Jim's fears because I'd never done a record. And he's like, there's a lot of people that can bring it live, but you put them in the booth and they choke. They can't bring that intensity. They can't deliver. So we did demo versions of a couple songs so that Jim could get comfortable. And it worked out and everything was fine. And if somebody has one of those cassettes, I would love one because I do not have one. I would love to hear how those songs sound.
Wow.
But yeah, Frontline just slapped together some copies and gave them to the sales force. But we'd never, we didn't, and with the exception of like Stop the Bleeding, they had not been a demo band where, oh, we'll demo out all our stuff and we show it to the label and the label says yes or no or whatever. We just did whatever we want. So we signed to Benson. The dust settles after, having some shakeup in terms of the lineup, and it's, Ted, Aaron, and me. And the label calls and says, we need to hear the material for this record you're going to do. We didn't have any songs written, and so we just kind of ignored them. And so then they called again, like, no, seriously, we need to hear what you guys are working on. So I went down to LA one weekend, and we literally had a 4-track plugged up, set up in Ted's apartment, and Ted had an acoustic and Aaron had an acoustic, and they noodled. There was no songs, so they just like kind of went for it. Oh, I have this idea. Oh, I have that idea, and then sent that. And I think they kind of got the idea from there that they don't work the way that we work, and we're not sure how that's going to work. And then we gave them the record, and they were happy with the record. But then after all of the shakeup and everything, the record did not perform like they hoped, and some of that was like mentioned the UPS strike. We were number one. We had number one at radio, and we were number one at retail, and nobody could get the record because they were all just sitting on loading docks because UPS was on strike.
Wow.
And it kind of, and then with all the shakeup, all the people that had been pushing the project were all gone, and so nobody really knew what to do with it. And so it still sold well enough that they were willing to let us do another record, but they didn't know what to do with us. We didn't like hate being signed to them, but we were like, I don't know if we could go through all of this again. We need to find something else. And so we took a flyer. Ted called the president of the company and basically said, we don't want to work with you anymore. And he said, oh, that's awesome, because we don't want to work with you anymore. Where do we send the paperwork? And they were very cool about it. I mean, there'd been a modest advance going into Crawl that was, leveraged against publishing for more than one record. They didn't make us pay them back any of that money. They just, washed their hands of us and let us go. So, and then we wound up at Metal Blade, which was a much better fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That is everything I could have imagined the answer to that question would be. So excellent.
And again, I mean, I have nothing bad to say about Benson. They were all, lovely. It just wasn't a good fit.
Right.
They did not know they barely knew rock. They did not know metal. And to be fair, we gave them a really, out of left field kind of metal record. Yeah, I
Hmm.
think it's as heavy as our other stuff, but it is a little bit more out there. I mean, Crawl to China, every song has a different guitar sound. You know,
Hmm.
it just we took advantage of the fact that everything was changing, not to try and fit whatever trend was happening, but to just kind of say, oh, let's do some stuff that we wouldn't normally have done because we can do that right now and nobody will freak out. But I mean, song enveloped in Python and White Knuckle and the Rock Rosary and all that, I would put those up against, Vanishing Lessons or any of the stuff on POD.
Oh yeah.
It's still just as heavy, but I think that I think a lot of people got caught up in the fact that it was us with a bigger Nashville label,
Hmm.
doing a slightly different record and deciding, oh, they sold out. They, the label made them do that, and so they put out this
Mm,
really soft rock record. Like it's not a soft record, and nobody made us do anything.
mm.
No, I listened back through it today, and it's definitely not soft.
Yeah.
But the one question I did have too about that was did they try to force you guys to release like an AC or a CHR single?
Not really. Um, what's the only real, and it's not even really a fight. They weren't sure if they wanted to let us work with Bill Matoyer on that record,
Hmm.
because he'd done other records with us, and they knew that he could do the heavy stuff, but they were afraid that they weren't going to have anything they could push to, like, adult, radio or album radio. And part of what made us attractive to them is with Vanishing Lessons, we had our first charting singles that were not on the metal charts. We got on adult contemporary, and we got on just regular album rock. So they knew we could do it, but I think they were afraid that we wouldn't do
Mm.
it if we were with Bill. And then I forget how we got them to do it. I think part of it was we just stomped our feet and held our breath and said, if we're not working with Bill, we're not doing the record. Um, but by the time that we started sending them, um, anything, because like we didn't want the record label people in the studio when we were working, and we're not one for sending off rough mixes to anybody. You get the record when it's finished. Um, but I think it was If I Was There, we sent a rough version, a rough mix of it. And I think when they heard that, they were like, "Oh, yeah, okay, we can at least work with that one. We don't know what the rest of it sounds like, but we can sell that one." So you know,
Very cool.
So, bring us into coming back into the whole tourniquet realm. I mean, we were, I mean, I follow you and Gary. I mean, like the whole thing. I mean, I saw some of it happen, and I know Ted's death is kind of all involved in that somewhere, but like it seemed like initially you and Gary started to work together a little bit just on something he was doing. And did that sort of kind of bring you back into maybe playing and revisiting some of this material?
when we parted ways with Gary, well, let me just preface by saying that almost nobody has left Tourniquet and um, been much inclined to re-engage being in Tourniquet. Um,
Hmm.
our culture was not always healthy,
Right.
and so when we parted ways with Gary, it wasn't pleasant, and uh, and so Gary and I did not have anything really to do with each other for a long time. And when we reconnected, initially honestly it was Eric Mendez, hammering both of us. I just want my friends to be friends again. Why can't you guys talk to each other? I don't want anything to do with that guy. So Eric finally got under my skin enough that I was like, fine, leave me alone. I'll reach out. And so, you know, I reached out. We kind of, sorted some things out. And so there was some detente. But even then, I wouldn't necessarily said that we were, besties or anything. But I knew he was going to be at the NAM show in Anaheim. He was working. I think he was with Fishman at the time. Gary was, but I asked him if he could get me into NAM, and he got me credentialed so I could get in. And I found him at the booth, and that was kind of where everything clicked. And we hung out for a little bit, and it was like no time had passed since the last time we'd hung out, which was a long, long time before that. Um, and was I yeah, I had parted ways with I had been let go from Tourniquet at that point. And yeah, he was doing solo stuff and he asked me if I would, be on a song, and I said yeah, and we did that. And didn't think anything of it. Him and Guy did the two Flood records and stuff. And we were just in touch and kind of aware of what the others were doing. And yeah, suddenly we were all three of us on stage together in Ohio. So I mean, it really wasn't really planned. Uh, when Ted passed away, Gary and I had batted around the idea of maybe trying to get everybody who'd ever played in the band together to just do if for nothing else, just for some closure for us and for the fan base, so that
Sure.
everybody who'd never gotten a chance to say goodbye could say goodbye, but then also collectively we could all send Ted off.
Mhm.
And for whatever reason, it never worked out. It never got beyond the talking stages. And then I get a call from Gary that, hey, there's there's some chatter about maybe doing a Flood gig, but I think that it makes more sense to do this. Are you in? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And figured it'd be just a one off. And by the time we got to that show, we already had Sweden lined up. And by the time we got to Sweden, we already had another show for this past June lined up. And so at that point, it was like, well, maybe we should just keep doing this. And, so fast forward to now, and yeah, I mean, we're still trying to figure out the path forward in terms of the branding and the name.
Mm.
There's still some business we have to take care of where that's concerned. Um, but we're writing and we're recording, and uh, if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be doing this again, I would have laughed because I had no interest.
Mm.
But in this comedy, if it was working with anybody but like Gary doing the metal thing, I would have no. I don't need to do that. Revisiting the old stuff with somebody that I helped make that stuff with is attractive, but then finding out that there's still chemistry and drive and it sounds cliched, but that there's still passion for creating in that space, and realizing that we still have things to say and we can still pull it off live.
Mm.
Was like, you know what? Yeah, why wouldn't we do this? People are happy to see us. We're happy to see them, and we're having a blast. Let's just do this. So that's kind of where we are now.
Yeah. The live, I haven't been to see you live, and haven't been able to get up to the Ohio stuff, but the videos that I've seen of you guys live, you still sound great, man. I
Thank
mean, I know sounds like you're like a year or two older than me. Maybe you're more, but you're right in our age group. And you know, some of that stuff is not easy to sing. I know.
No, it's not.
I've tried to sing it in the car by myself, but no, it sounds you guys sound really good. You've got some great musicians with you up there on stage, like you said. You know, the bass player and you know the other guitar player. Like it's just you guys
Oh,
got some great people up there. So kudos, man.
I mean,
Gary shared today that you had just sent him a song that he was really excited about that you
yeah,
had written. So it
which felt
sounds cool.
nice. I mean, I'd never tried to write a metal song until about 4 or 5 months ago. I've written lyrics, but I've never like written a full song. And um, I would have told you a year ago that I can't write metal. Um, Jury's still out. I mean, it's not up to me whether I did it. We'll see how it turns out if it makes the record and what everybody else thinks. But
What he raved
at
about it
least
on the post. He raved about
Yeah.
it.
at this point, I'm like, all I meddled. I totally meddled. So you know,
You're all grown up now.
I guess so. But back, like when you're saying how we sound live and stuff, singing those songs in that key and in that range made so much sense when I was 22, and now I'm 54, and I'm like, dude, what were you thinking? But again, I mean, nobody, nobody sane thinks that they're going to still be doing anything like that 30 years down the line, you know, and yeah, the good thing, I would probably have been scared to death and might have said no if I hadn't done like the Reign of Glory thing the year before,
Right.
you know because I hadn't been on stage in a few years. I'd done some studio stuff. I did my solo thing, but you know getting up and doing an hour, it was a little scary. But then once I
That
got through it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can still do this. Okay. So when Gary's like, do you want? I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, let's just do it. And
so are you on speed dial for all these old metal bands just to call just in case? Is that how this is working? I'm just messing with you.
I, I no, it's funny that you say that though, because that's the exact reason why, well, it's not the exact reason. It's one of the reasons why, like the year that we did the STB thing at Immortal, Roger had reached out and asked me if I want to do the Reign of Glory set also, and I told him no, and it was because of the STB thing, but the other part of it was like I don't want to be the Jizzy Pearl of Christian metal, you know. Um, I mean, dude, that guy's a great singer, but he's like sung in every band,
Right.
And I'm still very flattered and very honored that Roger called me up and asked me to fill in for Robin, and that I'm shocked and humbled that I guess I did it well enough that he asked me again.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I don't aspire to be that guy that just fills in everybody else's bands. Um, but like, I mean, I guess you're leading up to the Vengeance gig that didn't happen. That one basically, I mean, if I was like, nope, I'm not singing for other bands. My focus is STV and Tourniquet, and I still want to do my solo stuff. That's more I've got more than enough on my plate. And then Glenn Mancaruso texts me, hey, do you think you could? I was like, yeah, okay. you know, because I mean, you can't say no to that. You
No.
know,
Yeah.
I
I,
have said many times, first of all, I was disappointed it didn't happen. And the reason why is because so we covered one of Vengeance Rising's albums, and they were such a huge thing back in the day.
yeah.
And I always said one of the reasons why I liked Vengeance Rising was that if they could get a real singer, those are great songs.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying Roger was awful, Martinez was awful necessarily. He was what he was, and that worked. But But that's why when they went and did Die Happy, I was like, see, like, I mean,
But I
but
mean, think about it though. Can you imagine any other vocal than Rogers on those first two albums?
yes, yours. That's my point. I was like,
You're way ahead of me
I
because
was so excited when I heard that you were going to be doing that because I was like, maybe people will realize what great songs these really were. Because I knew you would do it your own way, and I knew you would just take off and do whatever you do. But anyway, whatever happened, I don't know
somebody
why it
asked
didn't
me the
happen.
other day. Somebody asked me the other day, what were you going? How were you going to do it? And I still hadn't figured it out. I mean, we were like 6 weeks out, and I was still like, going, I have no idea what I'm going to do, you know. Um, and then it all kind of collapsed. It was just a perfect storm of things. They're older than I am. Not that they're like old, but we're none of us are as young as we were, and life happens, and it was just a bunch of stuff happened individually to a couple of the people involved, and we tried to figure out a way forward and just couldn't make it work, and opted to just eject then, while there was still a chance of them being able to fit somebody else into that slot, as opposed to trying to write it out and then calling them 2 days before going, yeah, remember that show? No, you know, so, and I mean, if nothing else, we all have a really great story, the epic vengeance gig that almost happened, so.
Well,
And it's flattering to be considered to play. I mean, I still think of myself as the new kid. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but I was the new guy,
Right.
and you know they they were there at the beginning, and I came along a little after. So for people like that to take me seriously and think that I can play in that league with them is that's awesome. I mean that it doesn't get much better than that.
yeah, and also as a fellow 54-year-old man, I often look for opportunities where I can be the youngster. I don't
Yes,
I don't find many places where I can be the youngster still. So
my closest friends are still my core group of close friends are pretty much the people that I grew up with, and they are all a couple years older than me. So
good. Keep it that way.
There you
Like
go.
I spend every Wednesday night at church with 18-year-old, 17 and 18-year-old boys. I lead a group of senior boys, and I come away from that every Wednesday night feeling like I'm literally elderly. Like they have a way of making me
He
feel very
comes home
old.
with
yeah,
And I think
injuries.
they,
He comes home with injuries.
oh, dude,
younger dudes are evil.
bingo.
They're evil, vicious pack animals.
True. Although it's weird, they're mellowing out as they get older.
Older,
But
yeah,
yeah, maybe they have a respect that I've stuck around so long.
possibly.
But anyway, so about kind of diverting off onto your solo stuff.
Good.
Pop Disaster. Tell us about how you that came to be, and then what the future is for your solo pop stuff.
So how do I try to think of where the real like genesis of that was? Um, I always had ideas for songs and for lyrics and stuff, and I'd always kind of had in the back of my head that at some point I wanted to do a solo thing. Um, and I knew that whatever that solo thing was, I did not want it to be metal. Partly because, like I mentioned earlier, until recently, I would have told you I can't write metal. But also because I don't understand wanting to do a side thing that sounds just like your day gig, you know.
Yeah.
Um, like Bruce Dickinson. I mean, he's great in Maiden, and then he does his solo stuff, and it's like you couldn't have done that in Maiden.
Right.
Yeah. Um, which that's not a slam. It's just, obviously he has these. I get it, because you come up with songs that are not going to be a fit for your band, and then it's like, well, what do I do with these? And you either just put them on a shelf and never touch them, or you figure out how to get them out there. And I'm sure that, not knowing Bruce, I'm sure that that's probably a lot of the impetus for him, is these are not Maiden songs, but I like them and I want to play them. Um, but yeah, so I knew that I didn't want to do a metal thing. Um, and so I started trying to figure out how to just, write stuff. And initially what I thought it was going to be was myself and Chris, my friend that produced Pop Disaster and played the lion's share of the guitars on there. I figured it would be me coming up with ideas and then the two of us fleshing them out, and it would be our project and just release it under my name. Um, and that's kind of what happened with the song Misspent. That was the first one that I wrote that wound up living long enough to make it onto that record. I came up with a lyric and a melody and showed him, sung it out how I wanted it, and came back a couple days later and he built a whole backing track for the demo. And then I sang over it. I'm like, that's great. We can just do it like this. He's like, no, I'm too busy for that. Figure it out. So I had to figure out how to write songs by myself. So um, I had written a couple and told Ted that I wanted to do a solo thing, which he didn't tell me no, but he was not terribly excited at the prospect of it. For a long time in that band, it was very much like, I'm sure you've heard, like, when Newsted left Metallica and stuff, that the mindset at that point was you either play in Metallica or you go play other stuff. You don't do both. And I get that, but I've always looked at bands like Dream Theater, where pretty much everybody in that band is in 37 other bands.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, there's some stylistic overlap here and there with some of the projects, but they all tend to, especially the Portnoy stuff, they all tend to have their own,
Mm-hmm.
personality, depending on what the lineup is. So I thought that was interesting. And, so he didn't say no, but he did say, please don't put anything out until we do our next record. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can work with that. I didn't realize that when I told him that in like 2004, that we weren't going to put out another record until 2012.
Ugh.
And, um, but in the meantime, I'd kept writing here and there and occasionally demoing stuff out with Chris. And so after we did Antiseptic, um, one thing led to another, and I suddenly found myself a couple years later, not so much being in a band, which was very unexpected and painful, because it was not handled well. It was not handled. It wasn't done correctly. I spoke to Ted on a Friday about the next record, and then I get a phone call from him on Monday telling me that I was no longer the singer, and he needed me to sign off on this press release that he'd been sitting on, because he just, was hadn't told me yet, which was like that. Wow, okay, and that's the pleasant version of it. I mean, it is what it is. But I was beat up enough from that experience that I was going to not play music anymore at all. I was like, dude, I suck. I should just like walk away and be happy that I have a chance to walk away. And Chris, Chris turned me on to Tourniquet, and Chris played on part of the demo that I sent to Tourniquet to get my audition. And Chris, sat me down a couple days after it all went down, and I told him I was going to quit. And he said, no, you're not. I dug up the demos. I've been listening to some of the stuff that you wrote, and I hear these that are definite keepers, and we're going to start working them up, and you're going to write a bunch more, and you're going to do a record. I'm like, okay. you know. And that's kind of where that all came from. Initially, it was just going to, first we were going to do a single, and then it was like, well, maybe we'll do like a 3-song EP, and then decided we'd do it Striper style and put out 6 songs. And then in the meantime, we wound up with 7, and we couldn't decide which one to cut. So we were like, screw it, we'll just put it out as an album, and it'll have 7 songs. We'll pretend it's the 70s. Um, and so that's what we did. And I called it the Pop Disaster because I figured that everybody was going to hate it because it wasn't metal. And so I figured if I made a joke about it as the title, that nobody else could really, make a joke out of it. And then to my um, surprise and thankfully, people really seem to like it.
Hmm.
And I think the material was solid. I think I have really good people that played on it. Dave Bach and Tim Gaines and
Mm.
Josiah Prince and uh, just Jesse Sprinkle. I had
Hmm.
some really good players. My buddy Jesse, um, and but I think that for the most part, what really made the project work was Chris. Chris had this way. I could bring him an idea that was passable, and he could figure out how to take this, silly little thing and make it this really cool, interesting thing. And so, the Pop Disaster, the follow we put out last Christmas as a single right on the heels of that. Um, Partly because I had realized, so Pop Disaster, the rules were if it sounds like something Tourniquet would do, we don't do it. And if it sounds anything, if it can't legitimately be called pop, we don't do it.
Hmm.
So after doing the Pop Disaster, the next logical step seemed to be let's just embrace pop wholeheartedly and just do a total pop song. And so we covered Last Christmas, and then I was like, okay, I'm done. I don't need to be that pop anymore. Um, and then we followed that up with a single called Mystery that's kind of in the middle. It leans a little bit more rock, but it's still very much pop in terms of the structure and the sensibility. Um, but all of that stuff is just as much in my mind Chris Canojo record as it is a Luke Easter record. Um, and I have a whole follow up. Well, I'm going to scrap part of it now, but I've had most of the follow up album written for a while, and Chris and I had started working on it a little bit in fits and starts. So it was more challenging this time around because we're used to being in the same room. Um, but he was still living in California and I was here, and he worked for Google. So his schedule was very demanding. So it was harder to pin down time to work. But um, he unexpectedly passed away in
Hmm.
July. And my initial thought was, well, that's the end of my solo stuff because I don't want to make solo records with anybody else. Um, but the songs are solid. I think the material is still good, and I'm trying to figure out how to get the work in progress versions uh, of the songs that we had started from his widow to finish those out. But the plan is to do the follow up, and hopefully, I don't want it to. I mean, it won't compete with the Tourniquet stuff because stylistically it's so different, but there is overlap in terms of the audience. There's some people that like the Pop Disaster stuff that would never have spun a Tourniquet record, but then there's a lot of people who love Tourniquet and were into that record because they wanted to hear me do something different.
Hmm.
So I need to be mindful of that. I don't want to compete with us, but I do. I enjoy writing what I want to write. It's not that I don't write what I want to write in a the band construct, but it's different, and especially something as long lived as Tourniquet has been. You have this 30 plus year catalog that everything needs to be able to stand up to. Um, and there's just stuff topically and sonically or whatever that just isn't a good fit, that I would write by myself. Um, so yeah, I'm still trying to figure all that out. I got to figure out how I'm going to get it done. I got to figure out who I'm going to work with. And I'm still getting over the loss. I feel like
Mm,
a part of me is missing. He was my closest friend,
mm.
and he was like my brother. Um, so yeah,
And I gathered you've known him a long time.
I met Chris when I was 17.
Hmm.
He's the person, musically speaking, he's the person that I've played with the longest. Um, and yeah, I mean, his son is my wife's and my godson, and he was originally from Hawaii. When he moved over to the mainland, is when we met, and his family moved back to Hawaii, and he stayed. And um, we we just pretty much we'd been each other's family for years. So
Hmm. Well,
sorry, didn't mean to
No, I think
bring it
it
down.
no, but I think
yeah.
it's great to kind of bring that out, let people know kind of where you are with it if they're wondering. Um, and yeah,
We
well,
both hoped that we'd have a record done by now. It just didn't work out timing
oh,
wise.
oh,
So
yeah,
Well,
for
that's
obvious
part of the
reasons.
story too.
Yeah.
It adds. I mean, because I've listened to Pop Disaster a few times, and it's
Hmm.
like knowing that he was part of the creative process. I mean, you see his name in the credits, but you don't truly know how much of a part of that he was.
yeah, yeah. Without Chris, truly, without Chris Canojo, there would not have been me.
Hmm.
You know, like I say, I mean, I would never have stumbled on a Tourniquet cassette. He found it. Like I said, he turned me on to them. He played on the demo. He's been there every step of the way, and especially with the solo stuff. Um, Left to my own devices, I would have just cranked out, Slippery When Wet Part 12. Um, because that's in my head. That's how a lot. Take out the keyboards, and that's where my head is sonically. A lot of the time. And so I would get that out in my demos, and then I'd send them to him, and he'd be like, "Yeah, we're not doing that." And I'd be like, "Yeah, I know. Help me fix it." And then we'd bang out the arrangement, and it would be way better than it ever really had any any business being. So
But that's how you know a true friend, somebody who will tell you this is bad or this
yeah,
is not your best effort.
yeah. Well, and that's part, that's some of what I'm struggling with in terms of, what's the next step? How do I, because playing music, doing anything artistic, but especially, something like music or prose or poetry or whatever, it's very vulnerable because, it's not like a painting, where yeah, you put your heart and soul into it, but if somebody doesn't like it, they don't like it. It still stings, but it's not like they're telling you that your feelings suck and have uh,
Right.
no weight or purpose. But when you're basically condensing emotions down into 3 minutes and trying to give it a hook, and somebody says, no, that sucks, that hurts, that stings, so finding anybody that you can be that vulnerable with is an accomplishment in and of itself. And then having to try and figure out how to start over with that is, I mean, producers are producers. That's their job, is to tell you that works, that doesn't, stop
Right.
that. Um, that's a whole other thing. The creative process, coming in with the idea and saying, is this valid? Does this work? And knowing, that somebody can be really hard on you, and it's not personal. It's because they want you to be, better than you are. That's
Mhm.
huge. And I had that with him. And some of that was just because of how much time we logged. But some of it also was because, um, he's never said anything cold or indifferent or insulting,
Mm,
and so his opinion had weight,
Mhm.
and now that's gone.
yeah.
So I don't know if anything's any good anymore.
It's hard shoes to fill for sure.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, and
So
that's
what?
it's just as someone who I haven't written a song in a while, but who used to write. I mean, I've written a ton of songs, but that is something a songwriter has to get over. It's not perfect when it comes out.
Right.
You got to get over that, or else you'll never get better. You'll never,
Totally.
and it's something I had to, because when I was first starting, I was like, oh no, that's the song, man, that's the thing, but being able to have those musicians around you who start to add stuff and change stuff and flip some stuff around, and you have to be willing to just let the process go, especially in a band, but or whether you're co-writing or whatever you're doing. So yeah, so it's hard to find people you trust to even do that process with,
Yeah.
to
I've got a small circle of people, that I'll, partly just because my demos are so bad. Um, I am not a guitar player, I am not a producer. Um, yeah, I've really had to step up my game with this stuff that Gary and I, with this STB tourniquet stuff, um, because it like with Chris, he just knew, okay, this is going to suck. I have to dig a little bit to, or sometimes it would be good enough that he would like really latch onto it, even though the demo was so bad. He could hear that the song was solid, and you know, um, whereas yes, I've made records with Gary before, but we've never like created it from the ground up before,
mm,
like
hmm
like we're doing. Um, so I've had to watch a lot of YouTube videos and figure out how to make this work better, because neither of us have time for me to be explaining to him what that's supposed to be. It needs to be as close to that as it can be so that he can make it better, you
right,
know. So
for
So we're not
sure.
ever going to get the Kickstarter stretch goal of an album full of demos of the
not
next
from
album.
me, not from
On
anything I.
vinyl, it's going to be on vinyl
Yeah,
someday.
Oh,
dang it.
but yeah, I have a very small circle of people that I can like send stuff to, and they'll look past the sonics of it and go, "Yeah, that works. Oh, I like that chorus. Oh, you used the word comeuppance in a song. That's you know." Um,
Yeah, you know, I like it.
So, so timing wise, is there a timing for either new Tourniquet, STB, or solo stuff? I mean, for releases of any of that?
Solo stuff, there is no. Well, actually, all of the above. There's no set timeline. Um, with the tourniquet stuff, we are actively working on it and pushing that rock up a hill. But there's some housekeeping that we need to take care of. Some of which is beyond our control, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate that. Some of which we just have to decide how we're going to handle it. But there's no set timeline, but we we would like to put something out, I would say by summer,
Mm,
Mhm.
but who knows? Basically, when it's done, it's done.
yeah.
And when we think it's time, then we will put something out. But for now, I mean, like even if it never sees the light of day, it's just fun working in uh, that space again. You know,
Mhm.
especially being more engaged on the creative side of it. I mean, the singing and all of that is its own creative thing, but actually coming in and saying, I wrote this, and then, hearing, cool, we're going to work that up. It's like, oh, wow, cool, awesome. Because that would never have happened under the old regime.
Yeah.
Musically, I'm sure a lot of it will be similar because of all the players involved. But I mean, are you steering away from medical references and that sort of thing, or is it still going to feel like Tourniquet in that way?
Lots of
Well,
COVID songs. Lots of COVID songs.
no. Um, we never really, I mean, yeah, with pathogen, well, with pathogenic and to a slightly lesser degree psychosurgery, yeah, there was a lot of the medical jargon and stuff. But
Mhm.
on subsequent releases, there wasn't very much of that. Um, it, it's tough to say. I mean, there'll probably still be some 50-cent words that you need to get a dictionary and figure out what that actually means. But at the same time, I mean, early on when I was with the band, we didn't do it very much, but every now and then it was usually if something was not going right and we just either needed to let off steam or needed a distraction until we could fix whatever was going on. Um, Somebody, usually Ted, would yell punk, and we would just start, playing, everything get really fast and just, lots of jigga, 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 and then there'd be a break and somebody would just scream or whatever into a mic, and then they'd go right back to it, and then he'd count it back off and we'd go back into whatever song we'd been playing. So we're just as likely to do something, you know, stupid or just, aggro like that as we are to, try and write some 20-minute epic with, you know, in Latin, high Latin, you know.
No, that's really cool.
I prefer the
I
low
mean, I'm
Latin
excited to.
personally. I prefer the
Oh,
low
really?
Yeah,
Latin. Yeah,
the
I
big
mean,
Latin.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've always known that about you, Britt. But yeah, I was pretty excited when Gary started up Flood, and I was pretty
Yep.
excited to see, when you came back with some solo stuff. And it's just Tourniquet came out, we're the same age, so you kind of understand sort of where. And I
Sure.
was I was in radio from the time I was 16, Christian radio. So I was, and we had a rock show, so we were getting rock, stuff sent to us. So I was in it from kind of the beginning, and so there's understanding the historical nature of that band and how they fit into really not only Christian rock and Christian metal, but also metal in general, because
Hmm.
during those first few albums, like they were as big as a lot of bands anywhere in the
Yeah.
metal scene. And they were,
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially that level below the Megadeth or Metallica, like they were
Right.
right there with all of those guys.
oh yeah.
I think some
So
of that, I mean, I don't look at music as a competition sport,
mhm.
you know. I mean, like if we're talking live, if you're going to be on the same bill as me and I'm going on first, I'm going to make sure that I leave you as little as possible to work with when I go off stage. And I would expect no less if the roles were reversed. If you're going to play, you're going to work for it. But in terms of like making records and whatnot, I've never like looked around at any of the other bands in our scene as competition. You know, and if pressed, on who, I thought our competition was, I would have pointed at the Megadeths and the Metallicas and the Anthraxes, because that's the level that we were trying to write and perform at, but that's also the audiences that we wanted to play for and to reach. Um, but uh, yeah, we have been very blessed in this band, whatever incarnation of it. Um, I think it was good for us that we were too uh, heavy, proggy, whatever for the Christian market. And so they didn't know what to do with us, but that we were too, preachy, biblical Christian, whatever, for the secular market. So we've always managed to have a toehold in both, but never really be part of either. And so we just kind of created our own little thing. And
Mm.
this was us. This is Tourniquet. And we're kind of adjacent to both of these things, and we can exist and fraternize or whatever within either of those
Yeah.
other scenes.
Yeah.
But we're just us and we
Yeah.
do our thing. And, you guys just worry about what you're doing, and we're just going to keep tourniqueting.
Yeah. Well, I meant more you guys are on the popularity level. I think musically you guys are right up there with anybody.
Thank you.
I mean, that's what I just meant popularity wise. I mean, you guys had, I think that's what Steve was getting at. You guys had a lot of respect,
Hmm.
even in the secular world, secular quote unquote world of
Yeah. Yeah.
metal. You got, and in a lot of ways, you guys were better than those, the bigger bands, in my opinion. And so that's one of the reasons why I was so into, Tourniquet early on. Is like this is just as good, if not better, than anything out there. And so yeah. But I
But
appreciate that. I love that. Like if you're gonna make a record, you're not trying to compete with somebody or beat anybody. You're trying to make,
Yeah. Just
trying to say
make a
something.
statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make a statement and
and
make
I
it
think
count.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to do something, and I work at a ministry, and we always tell our people, it's like do everything to the glory of God and do it the
Yes.
best of your ability, because we are shining, we're like reflecting Him to the world. So it's like do it all the best you've got. So I think in your case, it doesn't matter which world you're bouncing around in, as long as you're doing incredible work that's the best of your ability. You're not trying to copy somebody, you're being original, and you're doing really high quality music. God's going to honor that, and you're going to find your audience in there somewhere.
Hope so. That's the goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It, not everybody gets an opportunity to reach any audience, let alone, a big audience. And I mean, and I don't say that like, we go out and play arenas and I don't mean it like that, but
Hmm.
we, to varying degrees, have had a pretty wide reach for a pretty decent amount of time. And, it's, again, it's cool, but at the same time, there's a responsibility that comes with that. And like you said, you need to be doing your best to be the best. Um, Not that you're ever going to be, but that should be the pursuit. But you also need to make it count. Don't
Yeah.
just say stuff to say stuff.
Right.
Say what you mean what you say, and be purposeful, be careful, because it just takes one misstep and it can all just come crashing down.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and that's one of the things I liked about the Flood albums is like they sounded like they still had something to say. Like you guys
Yeah,
still had got something to say. I'm not gonna say I'm disappointed in some of the other bands, but sometimes like when the bands from those old days are getting back together, it's kind of like they're just it's the same messages almost,
right.
and okay, if that's what you are, that's what you are, right? But that's one of the things I appreciated about Flood. I was like, they're still saying interesting things, that you wouldn't have predicted it or whatever, but it was cool. So I dig that.
We've always tried not to repeat ourselves too much, and we've always tried to like the worst feedback you can get in tourniquet, back in the day was that that's been done to death. You know,
Hmm.
because if everybody's doing it, then there's no need for us to do it. So it can be self-defeating because then you start overthinking, but at the same time it can also be very motivating because you are still looking for your shot, and you are looking for opportunities to maybe say the same thing as somebody else is saying, but say it in a completely different way that's going to cut through more, or cut through to a different audience.
Yeah.
um and that's just kind of been what we've always striven to do. Striven, is that the word? Strove.
Close enough.
But
Strovision.
it's always trying to raise the bar from project to project, but also to uh find things topically or scripturally or whatever that are a little bit outside the box, or that somebody's overlooked, and try and work with that, because everybody else, Petra and Striper are really good at being Petra and Striper. There's no need for, the slew of other bands that came in their wake that basically were like, oh, that's the formula, we'll just do that.
Hmm.
And I don't mean that as a slam on anybody. I mean, we all emulate someone, um but I think whether that was contrived or whether that was instinctive or whatever, but for definitely for as long as I've been part of the tourniquet world, that's always been in the back of our heads that, what can we do to be different? What can we do to be us as much as we can, um, but still fit into that world. How can we reach people and be ourselves and still be true to what God has called us to?
That's awesome. Amen, brother. Preach.
Right.
Well, I'm about tapped out of questions. Do you have anything, Britt?
No,
Anything else you
man.
want
This was more than I expected as far as time and just so much that you've shared, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we really appreciate you. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you telling us what's going on and historically, and and sharing your heart on some of the stuff. It means a lot.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It, it,
Yeah.
it means a lot to be on here, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I'd love to do it again sometime. It was great
Yeah.
chatting
Oh
with
yeah.
you guys.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Thank you, Luke Easter. Keep an ear out for we'll repost it if you're on socials for us. We'll repost all the Luke stuff. We'll repost all the tourniquet or stop the bleeding stuff. Any of that stuff. It'll just stay tuned. You'll find
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But we're excited about anything coming out. But thanks for listening, everybody, and peace out.
Peace out.